Hi, I'm Willie Bryson. Welcome to Fly Fish in the Maritime Provinces in Canada. Over the past year or so, I've had several people say to me they were interested in starting to fly fish. They were fishermen, with a spinning rod, so on. So they liked fishing, but they wanted to give fly fishing a go and didn't have any idea on where to start or what to do. So I thought I'd make this short video just simply to get people started, to show you what you need, maybe why you need it, and why you should carry it on the river with you. Unlike fishing on a bank with a spinning rod, you don't have everything sitting right there in a bag or a box or a cooler next to you. Fly fishing, you're up and down a river, you may walk a mile or two, and what you need, you have to carry with you. So, to get started, I'll go from the beginning. First, you need a rod. Now, again, if you're using a spinning rod, you get a spinning rod, you grab any reel, you put it on, put your line on, your tackle, and you cast. And it doesn't matter. With a fly rod, it's a little different. It's a combination of different things that you've got to take into consideration. So, first of all, when you think about fly fishing, you want to think about, what do I want to fish for? Trout, salmon, bass, pickerel, large game fish, because it all makes a difference in the size of rod you need. There are several different sizes of fly rod. The most common is probably a 5/6, and that would be used for small trout, large trout, small salmon. And that gets you away with most species. If you want to bass fish, you can do that as well. So if that's the size fish you're going for, you'd be looking at a 5/6 weight rod. And it always tells you on the rod exactly what size, what weight it is, and how long it is. This is a 9-foot rod. Now the second thing is, if you're using a 5/6 weight rod, you need a 5/6 weight reel. Now that's completely different to other kinds of fishing, but the reason is you're not just casting out and watching a bobber sit for half an hour and then reeling it in. Fly fishing, you're using a lot of wrist action, a lot of arm action all day long. Every time you want to move your fly or recast because it's ended the drift, you've got to do the same thing over and over again. And what you want is a balance between the reel and the rod. In actual fact, when you have the full rod on, where your thumb sits, you should be able to hold your finger and that rod should balance. Obviously with only half the rod there, it's not going to do that, but that's the reason for it. So now, if I decided that I wanted to go to fish larger salmon, larger fish, this rod isn't going to be any good for me. It would simply break under the pressure of the fish. So you need to step up and you would use a 7/8 rod. If you're going to use a 7/8 weight rod, then you need a 7/8 weight reel. It's a large arbor reel that allows you to retrieve the line much faster than when using a smaller reel. So again, your rod and reel has to be balanced and matched. That's a key difference. Now the next thing to think of is the line. There's hundreds of different lines out there. It can be very confusing, but the line is also weighted for the rod and reel. So you need to take that into consideration. But for purposes today, we'll look at two types of line: floating line and a sinking tip line. So most common, the floating line does exactly what it says. It floats on top of the water as it's drifting down. Your fly, if it's a dry fly, sits on top of the water. And if it's a wet fly, just the leader and the fly will sink just below the surface of the water. Now, if you need to get deeper, because that's where the fish are, then you would need a sinking tip line. And the sinking tip line does that. The majority of your fly line is dry and floats, but the tip, for a certain length, will drop under the water as it's drifting and allow the fly to pass by the fish at a lower depth. Typically, I have one of each. Now, if I have one of each of the lines, I need an extra reel or an extra arbor on my reel so that I can change it up fairly quickly. You don't want to get to the river and start stripping reel to put on a sinking tip line and vice versa. So it does become a bigger thought process as to how you want to fish and what you want to fish for. So if I was to choose one setup to get me started in fly fishing, it would be this. It'd be a 5/6 weight rod, a 5/6 weight reel, a 5/6 weight floating line, and that would get me basically fishing for anything I wanted. Now, the next thing, you need something to carry your gear with, and a fishing vest is the obvious choice. Now, there's a couple of items here, and I'm going to slide my chair back so when I stand up you can see. This is a typical fishing vest. And when you put it on and you snap it up, you can see there's lots of pockets. There's pockets outside, inside, and even on the back to carry stuff. And it's a great vest, but not so much for fly fishing. Now, this is just my opinion, but if I've got chest waders that's coming to there, and I'm not going to wade that deep, but if I wade a couple inches down, which I've done many times, everything below that is underwater and getting soaking wet. So it becomes a problem with if your flies are sitting in all the water all day long, or your pliers or anything else, it's getting all wet. So this for me is not a great fly fishing vest. The alternative would be this. You can call it a vest if you like. To me, it's just a couple of pockets. Okay? So, your waders come to here, you're fishing about here, your pockets are sitting above the water line as to where you would fish comfortably. So, like the other one, you've got pockets on the outside, you've got pockets on the inside, and you've got zipper section to carry things in the back as well. So you can't carry as much as in the other vest, but you don't need to carry that much stuff with you anyway. And I'll go through the items that I would suggest. So before I get to what I actually carry in my vest, there are a couple of items that I do need to discuss. Number one is a hat. And number two is sunglasses. When you're out in the river or a lake, the reflection of the sun off the water just bakes your face and bakes your head. You can get sunstroke very easy, your eyes can get sore and tired, but with sunglasses, it's very important. It allows you to see rocks and everything clearly if they're Polaroid, which they should be, underwater, so that you know where you're stepping and don't slip with your waders and your gear. So, must-haves is a hat and sunglasses. So now to the vest, I'm going to take a box of flies. First and foremost, I can't fly fish. I've got my rod, got my reel, got my line, got my vest. I need flies. So an assortment of flies for the type of fishing that you're going to be doing today. And over the series of videos that I'm making, I'll show you exactly what flies I use and where I actually use them in the Maritime Provinces. And that helps give you a guide. There's thousands of flies, but I carry maybe a dozen of different kinds. And to be truthful, I may fish using 4 or 5 flies in any given year, most of the time. So you've got your flies. Depending on whether you're fishing dry fly, which is sitting on top of the water, or a wet fly under the water, you're going to need some floating. And what this does is for a dry fly, you just put it in, shake it, take it out, and it helps the fly sit on top of the water for a longer period of time. So a must-have if you're going to be using dry flies. The next thing is leader material. So you've got your reel, you've got your fly line, and at the end of your fly line, you need to put some monofilament or a leader. It's usually about 9 feet long, and most people go for tapered leaders. I find them very expensive and very unnecessary. They don't help me catch more fish. This one, now I just spent several years in Scotland and England, and if this is where I bought this, and it's £9.99, so £10. So in Canadian dollars, close reference is usually about double, so that's about $20, and that's for one. Now it's much cheaper here, it's not $20, but they do get very expensive. This was a package of 3 for £12.99, so £13 would be $26. So what I do is I get some leader material, and I carry 2 rolls of leader material, and I strip off 9 feet to tie onto the end of my fly line. So the one is £3 test, and the other is £6. For the 5/6 weight rod, that'll get me anything I want to fish for. Now, just because it's £6 test does not mean you're limited to catching a £6 fish. I've caught 12, 14-pound fish on £6 test. It's a combination of the rod, the reel, the line, and the drag system on your reel. So don't be confused that if you catch a 7-pound fish, you're going to break your line. It's not going to happen that way. So next are clippers. As you're tying flies on and off all day long, changing your fly, changing your setup, it's nice and easy to have these clipped to your vest with a bungee cord where you can just reach down and you can clip the line. It's a must-have. And I also carry a small set of scissors. Now, reason for this is if I find that some of the feathers need to be tidied up, let's say, on a fly because I've had a strike and maybe it's torn one of the feathers, I can quickly trim it, clean it up, and still use the same fly. Now, if you catch a fish, I would say 99% of the fish I catch fly fishing is always in the lip of the trout or the salmon. They come up, they take the fly off the top of the water, just under the water, and they turn, and when you strike, it hooks them in the lips. So it's a lot easier to take the fly out, and I always have a pair of forceps. You've got the fish, you can quickly just get the hook, take it out, or using barbless hooks, you can take them out with your fingers, and I do that a lot as well. But you should have a pair of forceps. If it does happen to go down the throat a little bit, you can actually get in there quickly to take them out. And you just clip onto your vest anywhere you want. You don't have to keep them in your pocket because they're there all the time. You can just clip them on and leave them hanging. They're not going to go anywhere. Now, I just mentioned barbless hooks. It makes it easier for catch and release. I do that 95% of the time. I do like eating fish, so don't judge me on that, but I do release about 95% of the fish I get. So to take the barbs off, instead of doing it when I'm tying a fly, I do it on a given day when I decide if I'm going to keep a couple of fish or I'm going to let them go. Now, when you use a barbless hook, you're taking a chance of losing a lot of fish because it can wiggle free. There's nothing in there to hold that hook tight into their lip. But that's part of the game and part of the fun. But to take the barb off, a simple set of long nose pliers, and they come in all different shapes and sizes, from small ones to large ones. You can get something like that that's got a bunch of different tools on it. It's spring loaded. It's one thing I like about this is it's spring loaded, so it's always open, and you can just stick the hook in and just nip the barb off. And then it folds up and it can go back into your vest. The problem is, and you can get them smaller, but the problem with this one is it's very heavy. So I tend to slide this into my pocket. Just a smaller version for nipping off the barbs of hooks. It doesn't spring open, so you have to physically open it, stick your fly in, and just a quick nip, and that'll take the barb off the hook. It's also got a couple of small screwdrivers. You never know if you've got a problem that needs to be adjusted in your reel, and you've got a screwdriver handy to right at your fingertips to do that. So that would be my preference over something like that. Now the next couple of items may be strange to most people. First one is a big plastic bag. Now I carry this with me every time I go fishing for a couple of reasons, and it's not to carry fish. First thing is I live in Nova Scotia, and it can get windy, the wind can cut through your clothes, it can be very chilly, and I just cut a hole for the head and the hole for the arms, and I slide this under my jacket or even under my shirt, and it stops the wind from cutting through you and making you feel really, really cold to the point where you say, nah, enough's enough, and you head home much earlier than expected. So I always carry that with me. Also, if I'm going from one spot to another spot and I don't feel like taking my wet waders off, I can throw that on my car seat and sit on it, and I'm not getting the car seat wet for the drive home. Next one, and yes, I would say this is a must-have, pair of pantyhose. Now, don't judge me. If you want to wear them, wear them. They will keep your legs warmer. I've had several fly fishermen tell me that. I prefer to use long johns when the ice is just off the water, but if you want to use pantyhose, I won't judge either. The reason I take pantyhose with me in my vest is I cut off the foot part and I slide it over my net, and then I can skim the top of the water or even stick it in the gravel and shake it about, and you'll see all of the bugs and the flies that the fish are eating at that point in time. That way you can go into your fly box and you can take something out that's very close to what's on the water at that time. So the fine mesh in the pantyhose allows me to do that. If I tried to use this net, everything would just flow between the holes in the net. So that's the reason I use the pantyhose. And while I've got it in my hand, a small net. Now this just hangs off the back of your fishing vest with a bungee cord or an elastic cord, so whenever you need it, it's nice and handy there. You net your fish, it's a lot less stress on the fish. You can reach in, take it, get your forceps, take the hook out, and then let your fish go. So I suggest, rather than dragging them in on rocks and trying to catch them when they're flopping around in your hand, and that's a much easier way to do things. Next item, in Nova Scotia, we have a lot of regulations and rules around the size of fish that you can keep. You can keep one this size and one larger, but you can't keep two of the larger ones. So you need to have an idea whether it's within the limits or not. And actually, there's minimum sizes as well that you can't catch a fish until it's a certain. So I tend to have this. It's just a very small measuring tape that I have on my vest with me. It just clips on, and I can quickly see while the fish is in the net if I'm going to keep it, is that within the limits. Now, alternatively, there's nothing wrong with just having a very small measuring tape that's sitting in one of your pockets. But you should have it because you don't want to get caught having fish that you shouldn't have. Another item is a thermometer. Now, like I said, I live in Nova Scotia. When I start fishing, season opens some parts of Nova Scotia the 1st of April when the ice just comes off the river, and other areas is the 15th of April. So the water is very cold. There's not a lot of flies sitting around on the water, so I would normally be using something like a shrimp fly in the lakes or a streamer fly in the rivers so that it's looking more like a fish instead of a fly. So the reason for the thermometer is you can check the water, and when temperature's at 50 degrees, it gives you an indication that at that point there's a chance of a hatch of flies that's going to occur. So it gives you an option of, you've been fishing all morning, it's now 50 degrees in the afternoon, and you may want to start looking, okay, I'm going to change up and have a look and see what flies are around and what I can use. Alternative to that, if you're going to do catch and release, when the water temperature reaches 68 degrees, I'd suggest that you just pack up, go home, or grab a cup of tea. If you try and play a fish and the water temperature is more than 68 degrees, the fish is not going to survive. Even if it looks healthy enough when you're releasing it, the stress from actually catching it and playing it, and then you release it back into the warm water, the water temperature is already stressing out the fish before you even hook it. So yeah, when the water's 68 degrees and above, just give it a break and come back in the evening when the water temperature drops. So the next thing in my vest is this. It's a monocle. And when I get to a river, instead of just wading in and start casting away and hoping to catch fish, I'll stand back and I'll watch the water for about 5 minutes, just looking to see if there's any movement on the surface of the water. If I've got my glasses on, I can see if there's any movement underneath the water, and I can see where the fish are lying. It also allows me to look farther up the stream and see some of the bugs and the flies that's floating on the water. And again, I can go into my fly box and I can imitate the closest thing I've got to what I'm seeing. Very handy to have. And it's also great, you're out in nature, there's a deer crossing the river farther up, get a better view, bald eagles sitting in the tree in front of you, much better view. Just enjoy the time out in nature. Now, some things that people don't think of. Again, when you're fly fishing, you may have got into a river at one spot and waded down half a mile or a mile. Your car's back there. You may have thought ahead of time, brought a cooler worth of food, your lunch is there, and you're not ready to walk all the way back. So in my fishing vest, just an energy bar. It just takes that bite off and allows me to fish on for another hour or so before I have to head back. And with that, you gotta rehydrate. If it's a sunny day, even though you've got a hat and the sunglasses on, you need to keep hydrated. Now, that's it. That's what I carry with me when I'm wading up and down the river. It's got everything I need. Now, there are 2 items that I don't carry in my vest. One, pocket knife. That's in my pocket. It's in my pocket most of the time, but it's really handy no matter where you're going. And the other one I do leave in the car, and it's just a very small emergency kit. You never know what's going to happen as you're walking through the woods, and it may be nettles, it may be something else. You may trip, fall, cut yourself. You got some band-aids, you've got some ointment, you've got a sling if you've actually hurt your arm. But very, very handy to have, and make sure you take it with you every time you're going fishing. So that's it. That's all I would take with me when I'm going fly fishing. That's what I'd suggest that you take with you. So just go out, have fun, have a great day, stay safe, and tight lines.